I become a little bit concerned about the powerful influence of the arts, the electronic arts, movies, television, music, that really completely obliterates any sense of the body as sacred. And I think that, one of the people who did a great service in reawakening for us the notion of our body as the temple of the Lord was Pope John Paul II. He was such an earthy leader. And going back to read his biography and seeing the great influence that he was in the classroom and then out on camping trips with young adults, he brought them to a realization of the beauty of who they were as created by God. And I think then the Holy Father then, wrote, those thoughts on the theology of the body, to be able to help us to see how sacred the body is. And I think once people become aware of the presence of God as being not peripheral but foundational, then I think the whole notion of the sacredness of the body is important. And then, of course, you still face the struggles of temptation. But within the context of the temptation, one can identify with the struggles of Jesus' own temptation, at public times that have been recorded in the Scriptures, and look to see what power God gives us in the face of temptation to be able to do what He wants of us and who He wants us to be. Some advice that I try to give to other people, and it's born out of my own experience, especially when facing sexual temptations. There's obviously two choices that a person can make: give in to the temptation, or the other part of it is to see that the temptation becomes an experience to say, you know what, there's a love energy within me that's not being used. And maybe what God is trying to tell me when I face temptation is how much more I need to love more deeply, how much more I need to think of the other, how much more I need to step out of myself, as opposed to giving into what I think I want at this particular moment. And I think that's a critical discipline that Jesus asks of us, to see temptation as a very real experience of life, but to also see that, underneath it all, God's calling us to do something more with our hearts. He's calling us to love more deeply. He's calling us to be more selfless. And that's a challenge that's a very real one. Well, I think it's a matter of having a common vision. It's a matter of having making the space to talk about the essential aspects of life. It's one thing for guys to get together in a locker room at a golf course, or to go to a pub after a football game and to kind of talk about the moves that were made on the field or how well a person did when they golfed, and maybe even in the course of all that to pepper the conversation with, jokes that might, in fact, degrade the beauty of love or the beauty of women or the beauty of men. But there's something else to be said when people can, in those same experiences, talk about quality experiences of life. Dealing with struggles of faith, talking about those openly, or dealing with the struggles of what it means to be loyal or faithful to one's spouse, or faithful to one's call in life. Because I think when we afford ourselves the opportunity to engage in those kinds of conversations, we're never going to be disappointed about where people are going to be with that, because it's going to be an invitation for them to become connected as well. And there's a heck of a lot that comes forward when people begin to share about those essential experiences. That's one of the things that I loved about being in the seminary. When I was in the seminary, we had almost 100 students here when I was in the seminary in Pittsburgh, and when I was in Baltimore, we had 575 students. And, there was always those experiences of talking to people about our essential questions, struggles, concerns, joys, hopes, dreams. And that was a good opportunity for us to be able to grow as men of the Lord. And I think that's exactly what happened with Jesus and his disciples. We get the instruction that Jesus gives, but I often like to imagine what those experiences were with Jesus. Remember, because the disciples spent 3 solid years with Jesus. And what they must have talked about around the campfire, and the questions that they must have raised, and the lessons that they must have learned from Jesus and his own openness, and how that own openness really passed on to what the disciples were able to say to each other. Yeah, I'm going to go back to say that I think that's a unique human hunger that we all have, and if we allow the noise of the day or the allurements of the day to silence that, somewhere along the line, there's going to be a realization that this isn't all that there is to life, and that there is that level of self that needs to be revealed to God in prayer, but it needs to be shared with other people as a brotherhood for men, if you will. And so many times in my life, I've been with people when they're checking out, they're about ready to move across the bridge to hopefully God's kingdom in heaven, and they'll say, boy, I really regret the fact that I didn't allow these essential elements of life to really become something I could share more fully. And if we could only come to that realization a lot earlier, we'd find a joy that God really intends for us. But I think what has to happen in that is we've got to, each one of us, be daring enough to initiate those kinds of conversations. And I think what I find to be so exciting today is that men seem to be a lot more willing to come together to talk about spiritual things, to talk about God, to talk about their faith, to talk about their lives, but within the context of faith. And it's a challenge that says, well, if you can talk about the moves that were made on a football field, or how well or how poorly you did at golf, how much more substantial it is to talk about those things that are deep inside, that are screaming to come out and to receive the strength, support, or maybe the challenge of other people who could understand my mindset. Because there's somebody on the other end who really understands, and somebody on the other end who really cares. And I think for people who face addictions, there's often the sense of abandonment. Nobody understands me, nobody cares about me. And to be soul partners with each other is an experience that helps us get to the core of who God called us to be in the first place.